G'day guys, week 7, only 2 more weeks to go. Hope you've done your Christmas shopping or you're getting onto that now. Not long now. Okay, well this week, quite a strong warning, and so the passage is called, we've titled the week Warning, as you'll see. Well, let's get into it. First question, have a chat about what happened last week in the sermon, and then get into reading James chapter 4, verse 13 to chapter 5, verse 6. Bridges both over the chapter break, but you'll see why as you read it. Then break into groups again, or do it individually to get people to write a bit of a structure for how they think the passage is broken up into themes. One of the things that I've found helpful is I've rearranged the questions. There's a couple of questions you'll see as you go through. The third question is, what questions have you got at the passage? And we were doing that later on. We've switched that to put the questions before, and that'll help the structure and the main point come out of that. So hopefully you'll see that. And I've put in italics in the studies, just a reminder about what we're doing at each question. So this one, just to get a few people to share what they came up with their summaries, and the rest share with the rest of the group, or so you get to ask a couple of people or everyone, depending on time, share their thoughts, and then use that as a basis of the discussion about what the passage seems to be about. So people, what do you reckon about that breakup? Does that seem to capture what's going on in the passage? And there can be discussion. Suggested breakup of this passage is chapter 4, verse 13 to 17, is arrogance is condemned. You'll see in this section, I'll talk about it a little bit later on, but this is directed, 13 to 17, directed to both Christians and those who are of the world, those who aren't yet Christians, or who aren't Christians. So this one covers both people. And then chapter 5, 1 to 6, is directed specifically at those who are rich, those who are the rich, ungodly, unrighteous people, unsaved. And so the heading arrogance is condemned is the first section, and second 5, 1 to 6 is those who misuse wealth are condemned. They're condemned because the rich are condemned because they selfishly hoard wealth. They rip off the workers. They're self-indulgent in the way that they live, and they oppress and they kill the innocent. Okay, so that's a suggested breakup, but it's pretty clear the two sections are quite different as you read it, even though they're covering the same topic. What questions do you have of the passage? Some suggestions there in italics. Have a read through those again. Just if you're finding that that's not quite working as well as you'd like, a few suggestions there. That's some tips on how to do that well. But I put 3 questions in there that I thought might come up. First of all, who is James addressing in these sections? Are they rich Christians? So a little bit about what I was just talking about. 4, 13 to 17 is addressed to both Christians and the world. The warnings there are that life is a mist, and that our lives are at the whim of the Lord. They're under His control about how long we live, when we die. And it's a reminder to Christians not get caught up in the things of the world. And it's a warning to the world about who's really in charge of what happens. So that's the first section. The second section, as I said, is to non-Christians. But we'll have a look at that in the third bit here. My second question is, how does 4:17 fit into what comes before that? Because when you read that, have a read of it, it sort of clunks a bit. So have a squiz at that one. And then, as I've said, this is thought to be a well-known saying, which James sees as applicable to what he's just taught. And it's a strong... James adds this as an encouragement to do what he has just commanded. It's a strong reminder to people that they can't say that they've done nothing wrong, because not doing what you should have done is as real and as serious a sin as committing something blatantly sinful. So it's a reminder in 4:17 about that. And so if chapter 5, 1 to 6, my next question is to non-Christians, why is it being preached to Christians? So when you read through that, it's the reason I say it's to non-Christians is because there's judgment. It's just judgment, judgment, judgment. There's no opportunity for salvation from that. It's just judgment at the return of the Lord. So it's quite clear 5:1 to 6 is to non-Christians. But why is it being preached to Christians, and why is it in the letter to Christians? Well, it's helpful to bring this out anyway, by the way, if nobody brings it out in the questions that they have. But you can imagine that preaching this message to Christians does two things. Firstly, verse 1 reminds the faithful that there's nothing to envy of the rich, as they hear about the misery that's going to come upon them. So it's not something that you'll want to envy, being rich. And James uses the term rich to describe throughout the book as the unrighteous rich person, not wealthy Christians. He warns wealthy Christians about the danger of wealth and of being wealthy. But when he talks about rich, and uses that term, he's talking about those who are unsaved. And he reminds that Christians in verse 4 that God will avenge the wrongs suffered by the poor, especially talking about those who've not been paid what's due to them. So a few things that I think might come out there. Question 4, what are the main points the author seems to be making, and what makes you think this from the passage? Just a few tips again in italics, have a look at those. I think what James is trying to bring out here is that God cares greatly about how the wealthy live. This section reminds us, the first section especially, reminds us that God is Lord and not us. He's the one who rules the world, and the wealthy live as though they are in control of what happens day to day. That tomorrow I'm going to go here and I'm going to make stacks of money and it's going to be great. James reminds us that it's all the Lord's will what happens to us. So that's that first section, which applies to Christians and non-Christians. And then the second, James pronounces severe judgment on the unrighteous rich who live as enemies of God. Those who are greedy, those who treat the poor poorly, the way they treat the workers, their actions will bring about the judgment and will bring judgment upon them. That's the way God will judge them, because of the way they've treated others. So they're the key points I think James is trying to get. How we live under him, and when we live under him, how that brings about a change in the way we live. What strikes you most from this passage? Well, for me, it's that the world keeps, this is applying it to today, the world keeps telling us, telling me, telling you about, it's all about getting ahead, no matter who gets in the way. You might have seen that in like The Apprentice and shows like that. It's not, it's not working about a team. It's just I want to be the apprentice. I don't care who gets in the way. So God says what matters is how you respond to Him, not about how you get to where you want to go, and it's how you respond to Him and how you treat those who He has made. He'll bring swift judgment upon those who don't accept Him as Lord and live under Him. And point 6, where are you being challenged in this passage? What's God calling you to do from this passage? Question 6. Well, for me, I found it a challenge about where I put my priorities, being reminded that where I put my priorities has eternal consequences. This passage is a great reminder of what's everlasting and what's rotting, what's rusting, what's of no worth. And it's so important to be reminded about this life and how short it is, and what's of eternal importance. It's a reminder that God will return to bring judgment upon those who haven't lived with Him as Lord. So it's a good reminder for me, and a good reminder to keep my priorities, the Lord's priorities. I hope it is for you and your guys this week as well. So just my tip again this week, just have a look through the italics, just be reminded about how to answer these questions, how to get the most out of the questions. Just some tips there for you. And hopefully you find this week that as the main point question comes a little bit later, you might have pulled more out of the passage, which will help you shape the main point. Alright guys, 2 more weeks to go. Hope you have a cracker this week, and look forward to seeing you next week on Paul's Home Videos. See you then.